The world is shrouded in a heavy, suffocating darkness. Within this void, a voice echoes, calling out to Eileen. It is a soft, urgent repetition of her title, Princess. Princess Eileen. Suddenly, Eileen's eyes snap open. She gasps for air, her lungs burning as if she has forgotten how to breathe. Sweat beads on her forehead, and her pupils are dilated with a lingering, primal fear. She sits up abruptly in her bed, her hands clutching at the sheets. The environment is dim, the interior of a tent illuminated only by the faint, filtered light of the moon and the dying embers of a nearby fire. Aaron stands over her, his expression a mask of deep concern and exhaustion. He breathes a sigh of relief, calling out her name again. Eileen looks around, her mind racing. She looks at Aaron and then at the walls of the tent, her voice weak as she asks where they are. The memory of what happened crashes back into her mind. She remembers the forest, the confrontation, and the terrifying sight of Kettle's hand piercing her chest. Her hand instinctively moves to her stomach, her fingers trembling as she feels for the wound. She expects to find torn fabric and wet, warm blood. Instead, her fingers meet only the smooth, intact cloth of her dress. There is no hole. There is no blood. There isn't even a scar. Her eyes widen in utter disbelief. She begins to hyperventilate, the psychological shock of her survival clashing with the vivid memory of her death. She mutters to herself, unable to reconcile the fact that she is alive and uninjured. A voice from the shadows of the tent breaks her internal panic. Kettle asks if she has finally regained her senses. Eileen flinches, looking toward the barbarian. Her voice is frantic as she asks what happened, remembering the violence he committed against her. Kettle remains calm, his voice steady and devoid of apology. He confirms her memory, stating that she did indeed suffer a fatal wound, one that would have killed any normal human being instantly. He stands several paces away, watching her with a detached, clinical gaze. Aaron stands between them, his head bowed, his face shadowed by a grim realization. Kettle continues his explanation, his words dropping like stones into the quiet tent. He tells her that the result of his test is exactly what they see now. He explains that while she was unconscious, she was restored. Every trace of the damage he inflicted has vanished, as if the event never occurred. He points out that she has been reset, exactly like the knights who have been pursuing them. Eileen stares at him, her face turning ashen. The horror of the situation begins to sink in. She isn't just being hunted by monsters, she realizes that she herself is now subject to the same unnatural laws. Kettle adds another layer to the revelation, informing her that while she was out, he confirmed Aaron is in the same state. The old man doesn't look up, his silence confirming Kettle's assessment. The realization is crushing. Eileen looks down at her hands, her breath hitching in her throat. If she can be restored from death, then the humanity she so fiercely claimed earlier is put into question. She whispers, "Then I am already." Her voice trailing off as she contemplates the possibility that she has already become one of the very things she reviles. Kettle watches her for a moment longer, his silver eyes cold and calculating. He shows no emotion toward her distress, seeing her only as a confirmed variable in the mystery of this forest. Satisfied with his observations for the moment, he turns and steps out of the tent, leaving Eileen and Aaron alone in the heavy, silent gloom of their shared existential crisis. He walks into the night air, his mind already moving toward the next stage of his investigation. Patrick sits by the fire, his gaze fixed on Kettle. He remains silent, watching the barbarian who has just revealed the terrifying truth of their situation. In his mind, Patrick processes Kettle's words. He realizes that Kettle hadn't just acted on a whim, he had been observing the minute details of Eileen and Aaron's behavior for a long time. Patrick thinks to himself that the more he observes Kettle, the harder it becomes to believe that he is a simple barbarian. Kettle stands with his back to the fire, looking toward the dark tree line. He begins to explain his reasoning to Patrick. He mentions that from the very first moment he saw Eileen and Aaron, he felt a strange yet somehow familiar energy emanating from them. At first, he couldn't quite identify what that presence was. However, after seeing the knights and the way they were restored after death, he became certain. He realized that the same aura surrounding the undying soldiers was also present within the princess and the old man. Patrick listens intently, his brow furrowed. He uses his own specialized senses to try and detect what Kettle is describing, but he finds that he couldn't sense any such energy himself. He wonders if there is a specific connection between beings from the demonic realm that allows them to recognize one another, a frequency of power that eludes his current disguise. Kettle continues his explanation, noting that the energy wasn't the only anomaly. He reflects on the past few days of their journey. He recalls how Eileen, despite being a princess raised in the comfort of a royal palace, had shown a physical endurance that defied logic. He remembers offering her food, dishes like shrimp pasta, which she initially refused out of fear. According to his memory, she had traveled for 3 days while consuming only a single piece of dried jerky no larger than the palm of a hand. Despite this lack of sustenance, she had kept up with a forced march that would have exhausted even seasoned men. Kettle concludes that such a feat is impossible for a normal human to achieve through mental strength alone. It was a clear sign that her body was being sustained by the same laws that governed the forest. The scene shifts as Eileen steps out of the tent. Her expression is no longer one of panic, but of a grim, determined resolve. She stands before Kettle, her eyes meeting his. She tells him that they should continue their journey. She states her destination clearly: they are going to the Denian kingdom. Kettle looks at her and offers a small, knowing smile. He observes that she seems to have finally organized her thoughts and accepted the reality of her condition. He closes his eyes for a moment, satisfied that his test has brought her to this point of clarity. However, his relaxed demeanor shifts instantly. His silver eyes sharpen as he turns his head toward the dense foliage surrounding their camp. He speaks into the darkness, his voice cold and commanding. He tells whoever is hiding there to stop coming out in intervals and simply reveal themselves. Eileen looks toward the trees, her eyes wide with fresh confusion and a hint of fear, as the wind whistles through the leaves. The silence of the forest is broken by the faint sound of movement. As Kettle prepares to face the true source of the disruptions, Kettle stands in the quiet forest, his senses extended into the surrounding darkness. Though he hasn't detected even a trace of active magic, he remains on high alert. A faint, shimmering light begins to coalesce among the trees, a translucent green and blue mist that swirls with a life of its own. Kettle watches the phenomenon with a calm, almost amused expression. When the figure begins to take shape, he simply asks if this arrival is the result of intuition. The mist hardens into the form of an elderly man holding a tall wooden staff topped with a glowing white orb. The figure is imposing, his presence commanding respect despite his aged appearance. He introduces himself as Adamant Largesh, the chief mage of the Lutian kingdom and a member of the multicolored orb school. He plants his staff firmly into the ground, stating that he has come not for a fight, but for a conversation. Kettle remains relaxed, his hand resting near his axe. He notes that if a fight isn't the goal, things might be easier. Adamant glances toward the group, his eyes lingering on Eileen. He remarks that there is likely no need for a long explanation, as Kettle seems to have already finished enlightening the princess about the nature of their reality. Eileen stands frozen, her breath shallow as she processes the arrival of the chief mage from her home. Adamant addresses her with a stern, authoritative tone, calling her a mischievous princess. He tells her that it is time to stop this journey and return to the kingdom immediately. He warns that if she were to cross over into another country, it could lead to significant diplomatic complications. The weight of the wizard's words strikes Eileen, but not in the way he intended. She looks at her hands, her eyes trembling with a deep-seated identity crisis. She asks what the point of a royal return is now. With a voice full of self-loathing, she asserts that she is no longer the princess he knew. She views herself merely as a monster, a creature from the demonic realm that is simply mimicking the form of Eileen. Aaron and Patrick watch the exchange in silence, the tension in the air thick enough to feel. Kettle watches the mage closely, his purple-tinted eyes observing every micro-expression. Adamant Largesh is undeterred by Eileen's confession. He acknowledges that she and the others have indeed changed from what they once were. However, he remains unmoved. He asserts his own identity as the chief mage, implying that his loyalty and his goals transcend simple physical changes. He steps closer to Eileen, the glowing orb of his staff casting long shadows across the clearing. He tells her that if anything has changed, it is only that she has become more perfect. He declares that she is still the princess of the Lutian kingdom. More importantly, he reveals a dark, underlying motive: she is the vessel that will become their perfect next queen. As he speaks, dark, swirling shadows seem to rise around his words, signaling that his intentions for the restored princess are far from benevolent. Kettle listens, his eyes narrowing as he realizes the true nature of the powers governing the kingdom they are trying to reach.